I recently 100% Doom the Dark Ages. It only took me 22 hours. That's a pretty short amount of time to do practically everything a game has to offer, especially given the $70 price tag. I bought it half off for 35, and 22 hours for $35, I'm perfectly fine with. Though I can't stop thinking about the people who bought the game at full price. Despite really enjoying the game, I would have absolutely desired more from a $70 game. The quality is there, but there are just games that offer significantly more for a similar or cheaper price tag. So, that got me thinking. If you ignore price and look purely at the quality of the experience, how much does game length matter? Obviously, this is pretty subjective, but looking at my personal top 25 favorite games of all time list, I took all the games that are there and used howlongtobeat.com to find the average for how long it took to beat them. Of course, though, the games that are there for multiplayer reasons I removed, and the games that don't have a defined ending I also removed. So the average time to beat them goes to 26.9 hours. But there are some standout games. I was surprised at just how many are below 10 hours long. There's even a spot where there are 3 games in a row that are 5 hours long. The real standout game here, though, is Metroid Zero Mission. I love this game to death, obviously. It's in my number 5 spot. But it's the shortest game on the whole list, averaging at 4.5 hours to beat. And for me, it only takes 2 or 3 hours to beat it. So it's even shorter. Another standout game on the opposite end is Elden Ring, taking on average 60 hours. But I will talk more about that game later in the video. Technically, Minecraft is the one I should put here because it is the longest one. But Elden Ring, I feel, is a better pick to talk about because in Minecraft, even though it technically does have an ending, most people keep going a long, long time after that point. The thing I've really noticed looking at the actual numbers is it doesn't take a lot of time for a game to stick with me or impact me. I actually would say I prefer short games, but there is something that short games have to do very well, and that is making the experience feel complete. So how much time does it take for a game to feel like a complete experience? My opinion is an hour. I think there are some very good and complete games that are only an hour long. And the game that I think of first that fits this criteria is Presentable Liberty. This is a game that came out in 2014, and it's actually a sequel to a game called Menagerie. I think that's that word, which I had no clue until making this video. I thought the game just was its own thing. The game really stands out on its own, at least to me. So what makes it so impactful? It's really the story. The game itself has incredibly minimalistic gameplay, where you're pretty much just confined to a jail cell, and occasionally receive letters from a few people. There's no way to speed up the process or anything, you just have to wait. The 2 most notable people being Mr. Smiley, a guy hired to try to keep the protagonist non-suicidal, and Charlotte, the only person left alive in the city, as the game takes place during an epidemic caused by an unknown virus that has already wiped out 98% of the human population, with most of the survivors being prison inmates. I won't go too much more into details because if you don't know about this game, you absolutely need to play it, or you could even just watch it. The game tackles themes of suicide and loneliness, which is made very impactful given the suicide of the game's creator, Robert Wertpol Brock, only a few years after the game's release. So rest in peace to Robbie. The game's virus outbreak scenario 2 has only aged insanely, as 6 years after the game's release, the COVID-19 outbreak would begin, leaving many people confined to their rooms, similar to the game's protagonist. Okay, maybe I chose a bit of a heavy game to mention for this segment, but I think it's a very important piece of media to not let be forgotten. For a lighter game, Refunct is good. Jump around on the platforms until it makes a heart. You can 100% it in only a few hours, or even just an hour. Good game. Now, what do other people think about the length of games? Going to the hellhole Reddit, I asked r/video games this question. Ignoring the price of a game, how much does game length matter to you? And oh my god, Reddit users can be insufferable. I think the platform is great in concept. I like the layout of it. I like the functionality, but the people who use it and run it are something else. A lot of people ignored the first part of the question and cited price as a big player, which obviously it is. That is why I said to ignore it in the first 6 words of the question. And then there was this guy that replied, "Did you just reword my post from earlier on purpose?" Or I don't know who you are. I barely use Reddit, and this is such a basic question that obviously similar ones have been asked before and will be asked again. You are not original, and I'm not either. No one stole from you. I just asked a question I was curious about. Anyways, there were some good replies. Some simple and some more in depth. This one just says, length is completely irrelevant. Which is a very simple statement, but I could vibe with it. Just an open-minded person wanting to play a good game. I do have to give a shout out to Shadows D151 for having easily the best and most thought out reply, saying, "It matters in the moment. Sometimes I have a ton of free time and the patience for a 100-hour long RPG. Other times I have 30 minutes free and a short action-oriented title that's barely a few hours long total across its many missions is much better for me. To say length doesn't matter, though, is only half true. What truly matters is a game's pacing. 100 hours of doing the same 3 things over and over again isn't something I have the patience for. Most open sandboxes and roguelikes bore me to no end after a point, and an awfully dragged out experience is far worse than one that's short and sweet." I love this reply because it brings in a new topic. My main argument against game length mattering is a game could feel complete while remaining short. This person's argument is the thing that truly matters is the game's pacing, which somehow I didn't think about. This is just true. Pacing matters so much, and for me, it doesn't actually impact my first playthrough heavily, but does impact my consecutive playthroughs. When I played Breath of the Wild for the first time, it was actually unreal, and some of the most fun I've ever had playing a game. And obviously, that still carries it pretty high up on my list, being at number 6. But it was once number 1. It just slowly keeps dropping because as time goes on, the less and less I want to replay it, because that game's pacing is somewhat slow. Same thing to a lesser extent with Elden Ring. Elden Ring had one of my favorite first playthroughs of all time. I looked forward to it for years. I pre-ordered the game, picked it up at GameStop, and actually just didn't stop playing it for like a month, maybe a month and a half, maybe even 2 months. But after I got done with my first playthrough, which took, I think, a bit over 200 hours, despite loving the experience, I had absolutely no desire to replay it. And still almost 4 years later, I have no desire to play it again. Which is for 2 reasons, both involving the pacing. First is more specific to Elden Ring. The bosses have so much health. Like, it's insane. There's no reason why nearly every mainline boss in the game needs to have as much health as Slave Knight Gale did in Dark Souls 3. That's its own topic, though. The other reason is more general for games, and applies to both Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring. Open world games are just overwhelming, and inconsistently paced. I would much rather have a more linear game because it's just easier to have good pacing in a linear game. That's just my opinion, though. Obviously, I am in the minority on this, for not caring heavily for open world games. But there are, of course, exceptions. Like, I think GTA 5 story mode has incredible pacing, despite the game's map being so humongoulitis. Which, while writing that part, I got another good reply on the Reddit post. One I won't go as in-depth in because it essentially Reddit's? What? It essentially mirrors what I just said, just with more examples. They say, "It doesn't matter much. It just depends if the game justifies its length. Red Dead 2, in my opinion, doesn't at all, and I never finished it. Death Stranding 2, Breath of the Wild, Persona 5 mostly, Baldur's Gate 3 mostly, and Clair Obscur all absolutely do, though, and I finished every single one of them. I generally prefer shorter, more linear games, though." I pretty much already said I agree with this, but I wanted to highlight it solely because it shows that I'm not alone in preferring linear games. like in the middle of the open world gaming craze. Not everything needs to be open world. Put more levels in my video games. So asking Reddit was surprisingly helpful, despite the amount of duds in the comments. There were other good comments in the thread, other than the ones that I had mentioned, but they mostly repeat the same things I already highlighted, so there's no real point of going over them. The main reason I think the Reddit answers, especially the good ones, were interesting is because they focused more on longer games. Writing this video, I was primarily thinking about, like, how short could a game be and still be good? So I'm glad to have some people chime in on the opposite end of the spectrum, because for some reason, it just didn't cross my mind. It didn't cross my mind that a game could be, like, too long or drag out for too long. So that was nice. I suppose the main takeaways are you can have a complete gaming experience in only an hour or two, and a game can be however long it wants to be, so long as it has good pacing and can carry its own weight throughout the game. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like this was a bit of a nothing burger video because the takeaways seem obvious to me, but it's just a simple little topic I wanted to rant about for a bit and get some other opinions on. So, anyways, have a good day. Thanks for listening. Yep. Thanks for listening. And if you got anything, like literally anything out of this video, I don't know why I made it. I feel like this topic is not interesting. But if you got something out of it, a like and subscribe would be very cool. This was a fun video to make. I just don't know why I made it.